Ethan Carter never imagined he would one day disguise himself as a chauffeur to uncover the truth about the woman he loved. Born and raised in Albany, New York, Ethan grew up in a small suburban home where every dollar mattered. His mother, a dedicated nurse, worked long shifts at the hospital, while his father, a skilled mechanic, spent his days repairing cars in the family's garage. Life was never easy, but it was honest. From a young age, Ethan learned that success wasn't handed to anyone, it had to be earned through grit and determination. While other kids spent their weekends playing baseball or going to the mall, Ethan was in his father's workshop, taking apart old engines and putting them back together. By the time he was a teenager, he was designing prototypes for more fuel-efficient car engines. He wasn't just mechanically inclined, he was a visionary. At age 20, he founded his first startup focused on sustainable automotive technology, working tirelessly to create a name for himself. By the time he was 34, Ethan had transformed that small startup into a billion-dollar empire. His name appeared in business magazines, and industry leaders praised him as a self-made success. But despite his wealth, he remained grounded. Ethan still preferred to drive himself rather than rely on chauffeurs, and he treated every employee in his company with respect, from the janitor to the executives. Money had given him opportunities, but it had never changed who he was at his core. It was at an exclusive charity gala in Manhattan that Ethan met Olivia Harrison. Unlike the other guests who were busy networking and showing off their wealth, Olivia stood quietly in the corner, studying a painting with genuine interest. Dressed in an elegant but understated navy blue dress, she exuded grace without pretension. When Ethan approached her, she smiled warmly, her hazel eyes reflecting curiosity rather than recognition. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, gesturing toward the abstract artwork. "Yes," Ethan replied, glancing at the crowd. "Though I think most people here care more about the price tag than the meaning behind it." She chuckled, a real, unforced laugh. "Exactly. That's why I'm over here. I've never been good at small talk." "Neither have I," Ethan admitted, extending his hand. "I'm Ethan." "Olivia," she replied, shaking his hand. That was the moment everything changed. Ethan Carter was no stranger to high society, but Olivia Harrison was different. She wasn't like the other women he had met in elite circles, women who cared more about bank accounts than character. Olivia was warm, intelligent, and had a deep passion for helping others. Over the next few months, they spent more time together, and Ethan found himself drawn to her kindness and sincerity. But there was something troubling beneath the surface. Though Olivia spoke of her childhood fondly, Ethan began noticing small inconsistencies. She mentioned her family's long-standing wealth, but when he attended social events with her, he overheard whispers about the Harrisons' financial troubles. At first, he dismissed it as idle gossip. After all, the wealthy often enjoyed speculating about each other's misfortunes. But the rumors persisted. One evening, Ethan's close friend, Daniel Brooks, a fellow entrepreneur, pulled him aside at a business function. "Ethan, you need to be careful," Daniel warned in a hushed tone. "I've heard from reliable sources that the Harrisons are drowning in debt. They've lost millions in bad investments, and the banks are closing in. Word is, they're looking for a way out." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Olivia's parents are desperate," Daniel continued. "And you, my friend, are exactly the kind of solution they need. A billionaire with a reputation for generosity and loyalty? You're their golden ticket." Ethan refused to believe Olivia was involved in any kind of scheme, but doubt had been planted in his mind. He needed to find out the truth, not just for himself, but for Olivia. If she truly didn't know what her parents were planning, then she was as much a victim as he was. That's when he came up with a plan. He would go undercover, not as a businessman, but as an ordinary worker in the Harrison household. The perfect opportunity arose when Richard and Victoria Harrison announced that they were hiring a new private chauffeur. Pulling a few strings, Ethan secured the position under a fake name. The day he arrived at the Harrison estate, dressed in a crisp black uniform and driver's cap, he was met with immediate disdain. "You must be the new driver," Richard Harrison said, barely glancing at him. "Be punctual, be silent, and for God's sake, don't make a fool of yourself." Victoria, meanwhile, studied him like an insect under a magnifying glass, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "Drivers are replaceable," she said coldly. "Don't give us a reason to replace you." Ethan clenched his jaw but nodded respectfully. They had no idea who he really was. And over the coming weeks, he would learn just how deep their deception ran. Ethan Carter had spent years negotiating billion-dollar deals and leading a global company, but nothing had prepared him for the slow torture of being trapped in the back seat of a luxury sedan, listening to Richard and Victoria Harrison talk about him as if he were nothing more than a business transaction. As their new chauffeur, Ethan quickly faded into the background. To the Harrisons, he was invisible, just another nameless worker meant to serve and stay silent. This worked in his favor. It gave him access to conversations they would never dare have in front of Olivia. One rainy afternoon, as he maneuvered the car down the winding roads of the Catskill Mountains, Richard let out a frustrated sigh, adjusting the expensive scarf around his neck. "This situation is becoming unbearable," he grumbled. "The creditors are getting impatient. The calls are coming straight to the house now." Victoria, sitting beside him, swirled the deep red wine in her glass, her voice edged with calculated arrogance. "We just need to secure the engagement. Olivia is already smitten. Ethan Carter is everything we need, wealthy, respected, and above all, loyal. He'll take care of her." She took a slow sip before adding, "And, by extension, he'll take care of us." Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing himself to remain composed. He had suspected the truth, but hearing it spoken aloud made his stomach churn. Olivia wasn't just a daughter to them, she was a financial safety net, a lifeline to their survival. "And if he doesn't propose?" Richard asked, his voice edged with genuine concern. Victoria let out a dramatic sigh, as if the possibility was unthinkable. "He will. He's a man of principle, Richard. Men like him are easy to manipulate. They always believe they're doing the right thing, protecting the woman they love. He'll never walk away from Olivia, no matter what happens." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the road ahead. Ethan remained silent, his mind racing. This wasn't just about Olivia being misled. She was being used. And the worst part? She had no idea. As he turned onto the long driveway leading to the Harrison estate, Victoria glanced at him through the rearview mirror, her expression cold and dismissive. "Driver, I expect you to be more careful. We don't need an accident ruining our evening." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said evenly. He pulled up to the grand estate, stepping out to open the door for the very people who sought to deceive him. But one thing was clear, the game had only just begun. As the weeks passed, Ethan Carter's undercover mission became increasingly difficult. Each day spent as the Harrison's chauffeur was a lesson in patience and restraint. He had endured their disdainful glances, their snide remarks about the working class, and their casual cruelty toward their household staff. But nothing compared to the rage he felt as he uncovered the full extent of their deception. One evening, after dropping Richard and Victoria off at a high-society dinner, Ethan parked the sleek black sedan in a secluded spot and waited. His role was to be on standby, ready to drive them home at a moment's notice. But on this particular night, fate had other plans. As he sat in the quiet car, the sound of angry voices reached him. Through the rolled-down window, he spotted Richard standing near the entrance, speaking with two men in dark suits. Ethan recognized the type instantly, not businessmen, but enforcers. "You promised us the money weeks ago, Harrison," one of them growled. "We don't like waiting." Richard let out a nervous chuckle, adjusting his cufflinks. "There's no need for hostility. My daughter's engagement is nearly secured. Once she's married, our financial situation will be resolved." The second man, taller and more imposing, stepped closer, forcing Richard to take a step back. "That's a nice story," he said. "But stories don't pay debts. If we don't get our money soon, we'll take it from whatever you have left, including that fancy mansion of yours." Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. This wasn't just financial trouble. This was desperation. Richard Harrison had gotten himself entangled with people who played by their own rules, rules that didn't include second chances. As the men walked away, Richard wiped the sweat from his brow and headed back into the venue, completely unaware that Ethan had just overheard everything. Later that night, Ethan paced in his small quarters above the garage, processing what he had learned. The Harrisons weren't just planning to manipulate him into marriage with Olivia. They were gambling with her future, betting everything on the assumption that once Ethan proposed, he would absorb their debts and bail them out. But the worst part? Olivia had no idea. She was the only genuine soul in the entire family, and they were exploiting her kindness, her trust, her love. For the first time since starting this deception, Ethan questioned his own choices. Should he tell Olivia the truth now? Would she even believe him? Or worse, would she see him as just another liar, no different from her parents? Just then, a soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Henry, the elderly butler, standing there with a knowing look in his eyes. "I don't know who you are," Henry said quietly, "but I know you're not just a driver. Whatever you're looking for, Mr. Carter, be careful. The Harrisons don't take kindly to people who get in their way." Ethan stared at him, stunned. The game was getting more dangerous. Ethan Carter had spent weeks gathering evidence, listening to whispered conversations in the back seat, and watching the Harrisons manipulate their daughter like a piece on a chessboard. But now, with the truth in his hands, the weight of his next decision pressed heavily on his shoulders. Would Olivia believe him? Or would she see him as just another liar, no different from her parents? The opportunity for confrontation came sooner than he expected. That evening, as he drove the Harrisons home from yet another lavish gala, Victoria adjusted her pearl necklace and sighed dramatically. "We need to move things along," she muttered. "Olivia is completely enchanted by Ethan. If he doesn't propose soon, we'll need to encourage him." Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel. He had heard enough. "Interesting," he said, his voice steady but laced with steel. A silence fell over the car. In the rearview mirror, he saw Victoria's face pale and Richard's jaw tighten. "What did you say?" Richard asked sharply. Ethan pulled into the long driveway of the Harrison estate, parked the car, and turned to face them. Slowly, he removed his chauffeur's cap and met their stunned gazes. "I said that's interesting," he repeated. "Because I've spent weeks listening to you two discuss your financial problems like Olivia was nothing more than a bargaining chip. And now, I've heard enough." Victoria gasped, bringing a hand to her chest. You're not. Not who you thought I was." Ethan finished for her. "That's right. I'm not your driver. I'm Ethan Carter." Richard went rigid, his mind racing. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed. "You're making baseless accusations." Ethan pulled out a folder from the glove compartment and tossed it onto the seat beside them. Inside were copies of Richard's unpaid debts, records of his secret meetings with loan sharks, and letters he had written begging for financial help, letters he never sent, but that proved his desperation. Victoria's hands shook as she flipped through the papers. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "I have my ways," Ethan said, his voice cold. "And now, the question is, what do I do with them?" At that moment, the front door of the mansion opened, and Olivia stepped outside. She had been waiting for them, but she wasn't expecting this. Her eyes darted between Ethan and her parents, confusion and concern on her face. "What's going on?" she asked, stepping closer. Ethan took a deep breath. "It's time you learn the truth, Olivia." The night air was thick with tension as Olivia Harrison stood at the grand entrance of her family's estate, confusion and concern written all over her face. She had been expecting a quiet evening, not the scene unfolding before her, her parents frozen in shock, Ethan standing before them, his face a mixture of anger and regret. "What's going on?" Olivia asked again, her voice wavering. Ethan turned to her, his expression softening, but the weight of what he had to say remained heavy. "Olivia, there's something you need to know." Victoria suddenly sprang into action, forcing a bright but nervous laugh. "Darling, it's nothing, just a silly misunderstanding." Ethan's gaze hardened. "No, it's not." He turned fully toward Olivia, knowing this moment would change everything between them. "Your parents have been lying to you. For months, they've been planning to use our relationship to fix their financial mess. They're drowning in debt, Olivia, and they saw me as their way out." Silence. Olivia blinked, stunned, her breath catching in her throat. She turned to her parents. "Is this true?" Richard stepped forward, straightening his posture. "Sweetheart, we only wanted what's best for you." "Best for me?" Olivia's voice rose, disbelief and betrayal crashing over her. "Or best for you?" Victoria reached for her, but Olivia stepped back. "We were trying to secure your future, Olivia," she insisted. "Ethan is a good man. We knew he would take care of you." Ethan scoffed. "You didn't care about Olivia's happiness. You cared about saving yourselves." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she shook her head. "I trusted you," she whispered to her parents. "I believed that, no matter what, you had my best interests at heart. But you were just using me." Her parents fell silent, unable to deny it. Then, she turned to Ethan, and the pain in her eyes cut deeper than any words could. "And you," her voice broke, "you lied to me too." Ethan's chest tightened. "I had to know the truth, Olivia. I couldn't stand the thought of you being manipulated by them." "But you manipulated me too," she shot back, anger now mixing with her heartbreak. "You pretended to be someone you weren't. You spied on my family. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." Ethan reached for her, but she took another step back. "I need time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared inside. Ethan stood frozen, watching her walk away. He had uncovered the truth, but in doing so, he might have lost the one person he truly loved. Ethan Carter had faced high-stakes business negotiations, ruthless competitors, and the pressure of building an empire from the ground up. But nothing compared to the crushing weight of watching Olivia walk away. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. He had uncovered the truth, saved her from manipulation, but in the process, he had betrayed her trust. Was it worth it? Days turned into weeks. Olivia remained distant, refusing his calls, ignoring his messages. He couldn't blame her. She had lost everything in one night: the illusion of her family's security, the trust in her parents, and the belief that Ethan was the man she thought he was. Meanwhile, the Harrisons' world crumbled. Their debts, once hidden behind their social status, became impossible to ignore. Their creditors weren't willing to wait any longer. Victoria had sold off priceless heirlooms. Richard attempted to negotiate extensions, but their reputation was shattered. Without Ethan's wealth to shield them, the world finally saw them for what they were: desperate and drowning. One afternoon, Ethan found himself outside St. James Community Center, the charity project Olivia had been working on for months. It was one of the few things in her life that had always been real. He had come here on instinct, unsure if she would be there. And then, through the glass doors, he saw her. She was organizing a food drive, speaking with volunteers, her expression tired but determined. Even in the face of heartbreak, Olivia remained who she had always been: kind, giving, selfless. Summoning his courage, Ethan stepped inside. At first, she didn't see him. But when she did, her face froze. "Ethan," she said cautiously, her voice unreadable. "I didn't come here to push you," he said, his tone softer than she had ever heard. "I just needed to see you." She studied him, arms crossed. "And what do you want to say?" Ethan took a breath. "I know I hurt you. And I would give anything to take that pain away. But I won't make excuses for what I did. You deserve the truth, Olivia, and even if it meant losing you, I couldn't stand by and watch them use you." Her expression softened, just a little. "I know why you did it, Ethan. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." He nodded, accepting her words. "I don't expect you to forgive me today. Maybe not even tomorrow. But I want you to know that I love you, Olivia. Not because of who your family is, or what they expected. I love you for you. And no matter what happens, that won't change." She didn't speak right away. But for the first time since that night, she didn't look at him with betrayal, only uncertainty. It wasn't a reunion. But it was a start. Ethan Carter had always been a man of action. He built his fortune from nothing, overcame obstacles most would crumble under, and made decisions with precision. But now, he had to do something he wasn't used to: wait. Olivia Harrison wasn't ready to forgive him, and he understood why. Trust, once broken, wasn't easily restored. But that, instead of trying to force his way back into her life, Ethan did something different. He stepped back. When the St. James Community Center faced funding cuts, she knew. She never confronted him about it, but deep down, she knew who was behind it. And that knowledge complicated everything. One evening, months after their last painful conversation, Olivia found herself standing outside Carter Innovations, Ethan's. But something inside her told her it was time. Ethan was in his office when his assistant knocked. When he looked up and saw Olivia standing in the doorway, his heart nearly stopped. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of their history hung between them, filled with pain, love, and everything in between. "I heard about what you did," she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. Ethan exhaled, standing up. "I didn't do it for recognition, Olivia. I did it because it mattered to you." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "I know." Another pause. Then, she took a deep breath. "I've spent a long time trying to figure out if I could trust you again. If I could move past what happened." Ethan braced himself. Whatever she said next would decide their future. "And," he asked, his voice cautious, She stepped forward, searching his face. "I'm willing to try." It wasn't an instant resolution, nor was it a grand romantic moment. But for Ethan, it was more than enough. Because Olivia was choosing to let him in again. And that meant everything. Ethan Carter had spent months proving himself, not through grand gestures or hollow promises, but through quiet, unwavering dedication. He knew that trust couldn't be demanded, it had to be earned. And now, standing across from Olivia Harrison in his office, he realized that all the waiting, all the patience, had led to this moment. "I'm willing to try," she had said. The words echoed in his mind, carrying more weight than any declaration of love ever could. Ethan took a step forward, careful not to push too hard. "I don't want you to feel rushed, Olivia. If this takes time, that's okay." She gave him a small, hesitant smile. "I think we've had enough secrets. From now on, I just want honesty." "I promise," Ethan said without hesitation. "No more lies. No more disguises. Just us." Over the next few months, they slowly rebuilt what had been broken. Their relationship didn't fall back into place overnight. Olivia still had moments of doubt, times when she wondered if trusting Ethan again was the right choice. But each time, he showed her, through actions, not just words, that he wasn't the same man who had once hidden the truth from her. As for her parents, Richard and Victoria Harrison had no choice but to confront their failures. The weight of their debts had finally caught up with them, forcing them to sell off assets and let go of their lavish lifestyle. For the first time in their lives, they had to live without pretense. Surprisingly, Olivia didn't cut them out completely. She set firm boundaries, refusing to let them manipulate her again, but also choosing to help them in a way they had never helped her, by showing them what accountability looked like. One crisp autumn evening, Ethan took Olivia back to his hometown in upstate New York. They walked through the quiet streets, passing the small garage where his father had worked, the diner where his mother used to take him for Sunday breakfast. "This is where I learned everything," he told her. "About hard work, about integrity. About what really matters." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I wish I could have met your parents." Ethan smiled softly. "They would have loved you." As the sun set, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I don't want you to feel pressured," he said. "I just want you to know that when you're ready, whenever that is, I'll be waiting." Olivia's breath caught as she looked at the ring. Then, she looked at him. "I'm ready," she whispered. And this time, when he slipped the ring onto her finger, there were no secrets left between them, only love. The crisp autumn air carried a gentle breeze as Ethan and Olivia walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of his childhood town. The golden leaves crunched beneath their feet, and for the first time in a long while, there was no tension, no uncertainty, only peace. It had been a long road to this moment. Their journey had been marked by deception, betrayal, and heartbreak, but it had also revealed strength, love, and the power of redemption. They had rebuilt something real, something stronger than before. As they reached the small diner where Ethan's mother used to take him for breakfast as a child, he pulled open the door, letting Olivia step inside first. The scent of fresh coffee and warm maple syrup filled the air, wrapping them in comfort. They slid into a corner booth, and for a while, they simply enjoyed the simplicity of being together again. There were no secrets between them now, no hidden agendas. Just two people who had chosen each other, despite everything. Olivia stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. Ethan looked at her, his expression serious. "Regret what?" "The way you found out the truth," she said. "Going undercover. Keeping secrets." He exhaled, leaning back against the worn leather seat. "I regret hurting you," he admitted. "I regret not trusting you enough to tell you what I was doing." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "But I don't regret uncovering the truth. Because if I hadn't, your parents would have continued manipulating you. And I would have lost you without ever knowing who you really were." Olivia nodded, squeezing his hand. "I understand now," she said. "It took me time, but I see it. You weren't trying to betray me. You were trying to protect me." Ethan smiled softly. "And I always will." Their conversation was interrupted by the soft chime of the diner's door opening. To Ethan's surprise, Richard and Victoria Harrison stepped inside. They looked different now, less polished, less arrogant. Life had humbled them. For a moment, there was an awkward silence. Then, Richard hesitated before offering a quiet nod toward Olivia. "May we sit?" Ethan glanced at Olivia, letting her decide. She studied her parents for a long moment before finally nodding. "Yes. But no more lies." Victoria's lips trembled, and she slowly took a seat across from her daughter. "No more lies," she whispered. "It wouldn't be easy. Healing never was." But as they sat together in that small-town diner, something remarkable was happening. A family was learning to rebuild. And a love that had been tested was finally at peace. Life teaches us that trust is fragile, if honesty and integrity are the foundation of any meaningful relationship. Deception, even when done with good intentions, can lead to pain. But just as important is the lesson that forgiveness is possible when met with genuine effort and change. For those in their later years, this story resonates deeply. We have all made mistakes, times when we misjudged, when we were hurt, or when we hurt others. But growth comes from recognizing those mistakes, making amends, and choosing love over pride. The Harrisons learned that wealth and status are temporary, but character lasts forever. Olivia's journey shows that setting boundaries, even with family, is sometimes necessary to protect our own happiness. And Ethan proves that love is not just about grand gestures, but about patience, accountability, and showing up when it matters most. At any stage of life, we can learn from these lessons, to value truth, embrace change, and, when the time is right, open our hearts to second chances.